Hey there, folks. I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and it's Billboard Breakdown. I don't remember. So, in my May 8th episode this year, I spoke briefly on those who try to assemble chart predictions for the Hot 100, where I respect the hustle, but I also knew they were looking for accountability from Billboard, a publication with decades of fumbling ineptitude or music industry graft, or both, influencing a lot of chart position and behavior, especially as all of the underlying data sources are to some extent compromised or changeable with their formula. So fast forward 2 weeks later, when the Hot 100 had to be delayed because Billboard had to internally audit their own sales accounting. Nice job, guys. I knew it was only going to be a matter of time before they either brought in some new rule changes or cracked down on those who exposed or embarrassed them. And guess what? Last Sunday morning, that happened. The website Talk of the Charts, which had been doing an impressive job tracking down component metrics that accumulated to make up the Hot 100, and even provided some predictions as to where certain songs would chart weekly and in on the year-end list. Yeah, the website got shut down, driven by a cease and desist from Billboard and Rolling Stone, some of which was driven on the basis of using some copyrighted image assets, but it also included directives that the TOTC social media accounts not tweet anything that looks like MRC data. Those are those larger chart predictions that aggregate sales, streaming, and airplay altogether. But according to the TOTC admins, they don't have that level of access to MRC data, so to me, this felt like spurious intimidation at best using the legal system. But I wasn't surprised, because it's not the first time something like this has happened. Look at past incidents with the Pulse Music Forums, no relation, or Quarb, where industry players like SoundScan really don't like it when their datasets become visible to the general public, because most people don't care about this stuff. Not because they make dubious claims of intellectual property, but with visibility comes accountability. And then a demand for consistency. And it's not just TOTC beating Billboard at their own game, although that's almost certainly a part of it. Because again, as I've said time and time again, Billboard is an arm of the music industry. That includes major record labels that have a vested interest in presenting acts as successful, by whatever means necessary, and with no regards for truth. So when the chart gamesmanship and gimmickry is exposed, yet again, as it always is, naturally the right solution is to crack down on a website built predominantly by chart nerds and teenagers running the math themselves for an eager stan audience, and using the legal system to do it. It should also be noted that Billboard really wants that stan audience when it comes to their traffic. Everything in their marketing and presentation has made that abundantly clear, but they just want you stupid and complacent, accepting everything they say, not actually, checking their work. And while Billboard was the primary driver of that cease and desist letter, one should also not ignore Rolling Stone's involvement here. Even if their attachment is purely tied into specific appropriations of branding or copyrighted images, to work in a coordinated fashion with Billboard is at best atrocious optics. At worst, it implies a level of duopolistic behavior that throws a lot of doubt upon their own chart methodologies, and just how much of this is geared by the labels for a larger shutdown. And while I could come here and say, Streisand effect, and making a bunch of teenage music nerds and rabid stans very angry always tends to work out so well for you in the end. Good job, Billboard. But I want to touch on what this actually reveals. Because in essence, it's the truth of entrenched capitalist and monopolistic systems that get lazy, inefficient, corrupted, or all three to some measure. When they actually face accountability or real competition, they cheat rather than actually play the game that they love to claim is the best and most fair game possible. It's the great lie that any of this is fair, rather than consolidation of power and resources at the very top, where in reality, the innovators on the outside looking in with less resources, they get bought out, or they get stomped on. And it's sad. And it's really kind of infuriating because a lot of the chart nerds and admins at TOTC, they believe in this system. They're not like me. They care enough to build accurate websites and archives. If Billboard's back-end archiving and site organization was not so hopelessly broken given their own frequent reorganizations, folks who actually paid for a Billboard Pro subscription like myself, we wouldn't have to turn to TOTC for some of that purpose. And what's truly galling is that Billboard did any of this while claiming any sense of journalistic ethics, rather than the extensions of major label PR they often seem to be. And Rolling Stone's involvement, if anything, is considerably worse, given how much they've leaned on a historical reputation for critical evaluation. And it'll be kind of disheartening that I don't expect any major music publication to talk about it. Not Uproxx, not Stereo Gum, not Pitchfork. And this is why I don't respect Billboard. Or the Hot 100, all their little arts of popularity, which so many people still buy into as producing the best music because it's popular. Because it exposes the lie of their phony meritocracy, be it artists who are stuck in deals who have incentives built for specific chart achievements, or stans who want to argue that going number one is a sign of organic popularity, not marketing or label manipulation. And even as I'm about to talk about chart positions, and every compromised source that contributed to it, don't make the mistake of thinking any of this actually matters or is altogether realistic when it comes to an artist's quality or success. They're playing a rigged game for your attention. Be mindful of that. But with all that being said, our top 10, and Butter by BTS is somehow stable at number 1. I'll admit I'm kind of surprised at this. Yeah, the sales are robust, but while it's making a bit of a radio run, it's not dominant there, and the streaming has fallen back considerably. I think that the margin would be close enough for Good For You by Olivia Rodrigo to really cut through, but despite dominance on streaming, her sales slid back a little bit, and even though she is beating BTS on the radio, it's just not enough to move beyond number 2. And that kind of leaves Levitating by Dua Lipa featuring DaBaby stranded at number 3. The streaming is still good, and the radio run somehow has not faded, but without that added little bit of sales traction, it's not getting any higher. And that kind of makes things a bit interesting with our next couple of songs, all of which are dominant on the radio, but are seeing losses courtesy of other channels not being nearly as robust. At number 4, we have Peaches by Justin Bieber, Daniel Caesar, and Giveon, which is middle of the pack on sales, but weaker streaming. But it edged out Leave the Door Open by Silk Sonic at number 5, which has better radio, but weaker streaming and sales. And All That Holds Over Save Your Tears by The Weeknd and Ariana Grande at number 6, which is weaker on the radio than both songs, but has better streaming and sales than both songs. I mean, you would think this would be an opportunity for Kiss Me More by Doja Cat and SZA to make a run beyond number 7, especially given their own rock-solid streaming, and given they're on a bit of a radio run, but that's a big margin to narrow, especially with their sales now on the downswing, and especially as for Astronaut in the Ocean by Masked Wolf up to number 8, basically holding steady on sales in the radio while stuff is falling above it. Case in point, Deja Vu by Olivia Rodrigo slid down to number 9, which took just enough of a dip on the streaming to offset a good radio run and a real sales implosion. Finally, debuting at number 10, we have Yonaguni by Bad Bunny on some excellent streaming and a bit of a sales for its debut. I'll talk more about the song later on, but it is interesting to see just how much consistent penetration Bad Bunny really has now, especially without any features at this point. That's kind of interesting to be dug into. But unfortunately, he's not really the big story this week. That's the more traditional album bomb from Lil Baby and Lil Durk that bulldozed most of the Hot 100 this week, and that's our losers and dropouts. And in the latter category, it's considerable. On Me by Lil Baby and The Good Ones by Gabby Barrett nabbed their year-end list spots. It looks like Goosebumps by Hume and Travis Scott and Hell of a View by Eric Church, they are just on the borderline here. And getting knocked out prematurely, we've got Wasted on You by Morgan Wallen, Hold On by Justin Bieber, The Business by Tiesto, and Solid by Young Thug, Gunna, and Drake. Although, to be fair to really all those last 4, they weren't all that consistent anyway. I'm not all that surprised. But we nearly had a full third of the Hot 100 lose this week, so let's try to contain this and blow through this fast. Starting with the previous album bombs. From J. Cole, My Life with 21 Savage and Murray hit 47, and Pride is the Devil with a Lil Baby hit 64. But from Olivia Rodrigo, she saw a lot more consistent losses, with Favorite Crime at 26, Brutal at 35, Enough For You at 54, Jealousy Jealousy at 57, One Step Forward, Three Steps Back at 65, and Hope You're Hero K at 84. Then we had a few continued losers like Seeing Green by Nicki Minaj, Drake, and Lil Wayne at 100, and Gang Gang by Polo G and Lil Wayne at 88. This will probably rebound next week with Polo G's coming album bomb, as well as drops off the debut like Tell 'Em by Cochise and Snot at 92, and Drinkin' Beer, Talkin' God, Amen by Chase Rice featuring Florida Georgia Line at 89. From there, we got a couple songs that have clinched their year-end list spots and are on their way out, like Beatbox by Spot 'Em Got 'Em at 41, and Back in Blood by Pooh Shiesty and Lil Durk at 48, but also My Ex's Best Friend by Machine Gun Kelly and Black Bear at 42. But where things get kind of interesting are on the borderline, like Trackstar by Mooski at 44, or No More Parties by Coi Leray and Lil Durk at 76, or We're Good by Dua Lipa at 77, or What's Next by Drake at 95. But as for what's left, Tombstone by Rod Wave fell to 94, For the Gang by 42 Doug and Roddy Ricch just cannot get anything going at 93, kind of similar for Quicksand by Murray at 85. But then there's the implosion of Miss the Rage by Trippie Redd and Playboy Cardi at 82, and Minimum Wage by Blake Shelton at 81, or Your Power by Billie Eilish just not performing at all at 75, or Made For You by Jake Owen at 74, or Ski by Young Thug and Gunna at 66, and Breaking Up Was Easy in the 90s by Sam Hunt here. Just a few more weeks, this is going to fall short of a year-end list, folks. We can do this. We're so close. But here's the thing. We're in a case, thanks to extended album bombs, that it is very possible that none of this is going to last, and that's why I don't put a lot of stock in our gains. Yes, Voice of the Heroes by Lil Baby and Lil Durk got the expected boost to 21, but I'm talking more about the boost off the debut for TOTC by Raul Alejandro to 53. It might be promising, and globally it's cleaning up, but can it hold out? The one gain I actually trust that will hold traction is Blame It On You by Jason Aldean at 51, most because it's insulated by Nashville radio and otherwise seems pretty locked in. But that does take us to that Lil Baby and Lil Durk album bomb, so for all the material that fell below the top 40 and will not be among the best or worst of the week, if you want to at 99, Up the Side with Young Thug at 80, Please at 79, That's Facts at 73, Medical at 67, Man of My Word at 60, OK at 58, Still Hood at 56, Who I Want at 46, and Still Runnin' with Meek Mill at 43. Although that last one was close to one of the best for me, I actually kind of really dug it. But that still left us with a fair number of new arrivals. And unfortunately, we gotta start with number 71, Snowflakes by Tom MacDonald.
Politician, you think taking guns away will save our kids from the killings? But you're pro-choice, abortion kills way more children. If America's so terrible and racist, it probably isn't safe to encourage immigration.
So I remember reading an essay about the Republican National Convention in 2016, where it described a split between the grifters who are just in it for the money hand over fist, and the true believers, the folks who get into all of this because there's a cause at the core they believe in, unwilling to see all the graft around it, or they're just tolerating it. I mentioned this kind of in passing last time I covered Tom MacDonald, and I honestly kind of wonder where he falls on that spectrum, likely some of both, because that is kind of interesting. Certainly way more interesting than any of his music, and the same tired talking points that some of us have been hearing since the mid-2010s. Because that's the thing. Once you realize that he's never actually going to challenge his audience with anything beyond these reactionary sound bites, if you spent any time around right-wing political discourse at all, it's just really goddamn boring to watch him go through so many easily debunked and individualized complaints, going from gun control to abortion to how if America's so racist, maybe nobody should immigrate here, followed by the hatred of pronouns, dropping ableist slurs, saying Black Lives Matter is only relevant in election years, a healthy dollop of a lot of slut-shaming and hatred of OnlyFans, and a lot of anti-trans rhetoric surrounding sports, complaining about the wrong people getting welfare, and finally, the ever-so-classic you complain about living in capitalism, but you live in capitalism. You participate in the system. Which is sadly kind of ironic, because he seems to have just as many issues with that system, where he's going to rant about people on iPhones and the pharmaceutical industry as if they're not a product of capitalism, and how people are set up in this system to fail. Gee, for a song about snowflakes, he's awfully whiny. But in reality, this is rooted in the exact same cultural skid mark as fake woke was, because for as much as he rants about all the snowflakes Snowflakes, he also has to have them as deceptive power brokers who will make you feel bad for being a straight white guy who just wants to be a patriot. Tommy boy, do I have to remind you that you're Canadian again? This is just getting silly. And while I could call out the boatload of fascist rhetoric that's around his rampant immaturity complex as per expected from any Nazi, I'd rather focus on the tuneless, monochromatic attempt at trap rock that exposes that he can't sing or write a decent hook or really produce anything with any sense of dynamics behind it. It sounds really cheap. But again, he is the biggest benefactor of a system he claims is rigged against him and people like him, mostly because he's got an audience who will buy anything if it triggers the libs. But he's never gonna go for the big ideas of actually challenging or changing the system, providing something for his audience to aspire and dream bigger. It's propaganda that just does not work in a singles format like this, especially when it's all about making you vaguely angry. At least the 80s Reagan era propaganda used to be quasi-aspirational. As such, the truth is that there's a hard ceiling to this brand of provocation, because it's not like it's getting added to streaming playlists or going to radio or will find any consistent label support. It's too dated, it's too sour, it's way too boring. Tommy boy, time for some tough love. You're stale, you're mediocre, your one trick has never been fun. It's why nobody wants to work with you, and hip-hop culture laughs at you, and you only got that recycled Eminem beat for Dear Slim because you overpaid for an NFT. Suck it up, sunshine. Oh, what's the matter? I thought you wanted the heat here. Number 70, Lying by Lil Baby and Lil Durk.
Like they killers, niggas really ain't outside. All these rappers act like killers. I be trying to bite my pride. I be cool, dog. Fuck that ace who post up outside.
Now, this isn't my favorite Lil Baby and Lil Durk collab this week. It's coming next, hold for a sec. But this is a close second, and I'm a bit surprised as to why. I think part of it comes down to how brittle, unstable, but yet single-minded it feels off the trap words, the heavy pianos, and all the weedy synths. You can tell it's a lot more of a Lil Durk song across his verse and the hook, where he really ramps up his chaotic intensity as he calls out the fakers who want to be out in these streets, with the most poignant reference being to a friend of his who actually got locked up for a murder he did not commit, which highlights the unfair reality of the bloody streets, where people who don't know the etiquette there only contribute to more confusion and more violence, and more people who don't deserve it falling victim to the system. Lil Baby's verse is also on topic and pretty focused. He's not as visceral, but given his role, he's not really trying to be. But you know what, for a tight, well-structured banger, it works, but not quite as much as number 68, Rich Off Pain by Lil Baby, Lil Durk, and Rod Wave.
And I come straight out them trenches in the field every day. Young nigga out that bottom, use my tears to motivate.
Yeah, it's the best song on the album by a considerable stretch, and no, not just because Rod Wave is here for the hook off the cushion of acoustics and pianos, with the spikes of electric guitar splashing across a groove that seems to split the difference between trap and drill in the bass and hi-hat progression. It's a really nice fusion, and yeah, the production's great. But the angst here is also very real. Lil Durk talks about the struggle to get out of these streets and all the scamming of PPP loans, which he never actually touched because that exposure gave his crew some real targets to rob. But then he gets to questions of whether or not he sacrificed his friends or family to get to this level of success. And you can tell even as he's denying all of it, the question does shake him. What is he really giving up for his art and this success? And that becomes the focal point for Lil Baby, as he knows he throws everything in his music to be aspirational for those kids, but he also knows he has to have control over his progression for his family. That's why he has to grind so hard. And even then he needs to manufacture some degree of artistic distance in order to stay sane. I honestly wish a lot more of the album had been like this. Unfortunately, instead, we tend to get number 34, How It Feels by Lil Baby and Lil Durk.
I know how I feel when you try your best to be real. I know how I feel when you think no one understands you.
I mean, I get why it blew up. More of the drill elements in the low end balanced off with the trap words and the pianos. Probably one of the more distinctive hooks here from Lil Baby. I get it. But at the same time, it's just not all that good. Both their flows feel a lot jerkier than they should. Lil Baby trying to have to stiff-arm women who get in his way from stacking money and grinding. And then there's Lil Durk's vocals, which sound like they were recorded in a different studio altogether with a considerably worse mic. A pretty consistent issue across the entire album, if we're being honest. And in between talking about violence and poverty growing up, He's then gonna complain about women who are cheating on him and then washing their clothes to get the cum out. I mean, I get the flex where both of them are trying to sympathize with folks in similar straits with some slightly different framing of the two of them, but this feels like a really clunky way to get to that point, so yeah, just okay. Number 31, 2040 by Lil Baby and Lil Durk.
I be busy, I'm not in my comments. I be playing with that fire like I'm John Wick. Don't be walking up on me. I be ballin' the 2040, I promise I'm not for the moment.
I saw some folks online saying that this should have been the album opener, and while the rumbling, grimy spurts of slightly more textured percussion and the keyboard loop might be a bit better produced than average across this album, I'm not really sure what sets this truly above. Yeah, Lil Baby switches up his flow a couple times, even if his actual flexing is really not that interesting, but that's kind of similar with Lil Durk too. He's got the intensity, but outside of referencing how one of his friends died off of a bad Percocet, there's just not really all that much here that adds up to more, and you wind up feeling that this road is being very well traveled for the two of them, and that's not even counting the rest of the album that I'm not covering here. I mean, it's not exactly bad, but not really memorable here either. Just saying. Number 27, Lost Cause by Billie Eilish.
I know you think it's such an outlaw.
Okay, look, I've been saying it for a while now. The vibes behind this upcoming album have thrown a few curveballs for me. Again, not that these are bad songs by any means, but I kept feeling like they should work more than they do, hit a deeper point of emotional resonance. And thus with this single, yeah, that feeling is still here, even if I can say it is actually pretty damn good. The bass line has an old school swagger that Billie Eilish's hushed delivery can play off really effectively. She's got that charisma, especially with the judicious touches of reverb when she just needs it, especially around the echoing guitars that end off the song. And it kind of works with the breakup vibes here, where she cuts down this X with some pretty dismissive elegance. But, I don't know, there's no surprising edge or a flip here, and what separated Billie Eilish from her obvious influences was that unstable darkness, that Gen Z sense of mischief, where this makes it feel a little too easy. In a different universe where Lana Del Rey made a pop pivot, she could have easily cut this. I also think there's an issue with the percussion, and that it feels weirdly stiff and programmed. For this sort of relaxed dismissal, you'd think live drums would be an automatic, but apparently not. But as it is, look, I get why it is not getting the same chart smash debut. It's good, but Billie's definitely made better. Just saying. Number 20, Late at Night by Roddy Ricch.
In the morning or late at night. Long as you come through, I'ma make it come over and over. I'ma treat you like I'm supposed to.
So one thing I'm excited to see with the world slowly opening back up is Roddy Ricch getting some real traction that he was denied in 2020. So with this new single co-produced by Mustard, I had hopes, I had expectations, even if it was reportedly going to be a little more of a ballad. And, oh yeah, and I hate to say it, but I'm disappointed with this. Even beyond the chipmunk sample as the primary melodic element with the pianos in the mix. In fact, I'm not wild about this minimalist approach to the production at all here. It's not as completely spare as what Mustard used to do in 2014, but it's got that same undercooked vibe where Roddy Ricch just cannot build that much momentum off this production. But that takes us to the content, and it's not a good sign where the hook is all about satiating this girl who is ride or die for him, but for the first verse to have him question all of it. The tension feels directionless, weirdly placed, trying to keep her always guessing just so he has control of the situation, and that just comes across really insecure in a really unflattering way. So yeah, not good. And I really wanted this to be. That sucks even more. Number 16, Hats Off by Lil Baby, Lil Durk, and Travis Scott.
I'm the hero, I come through, say today. Hats off if you keeping it real. It's so easy to fall victim to fate. Dirt the voice, cause he know just what to say. I'm the hero, I come through, say today.
I'm a bit torn on this one. Yeah, the switch to the oily synth for a cut with Travis does vary the sound on the album pretty effectively, especially off all the acoustics, but then the trap percussion comes in, and it doesn't really vary much in a way to build a lot of groove or flow within the song. It just locks in, everyone has to spit to keep up. And Lil Durk and Lil Baby can do that, even if the content once again doesn't stand out much. Flexing, drug abuse, shooting people, with the most interesting notes being Lil Baby actually pulling back from fucking fans, and Lil Durk asking the now separated Kim Kardashian and Kanye West to get the head of his gang freed from prison, where he's serving 6 life sentences for murder. Yeah. But then there's Travis Scott, and putting aside how Lil Durk then compared him to Michael Jackson, the issue is that he just can't keep up with the same flow that he starts off his verse with, and the content feels even more shallow. It feels like he's a little out of place on this song. And look, while I get why this song's been the one that's blown up the most from the album, it's the Travis feature, but it reflects a project that feels more like a stream trolling paycheck rather than actually saying something with a little bit more punch. In other words, I don't think this is bad, but it's not really all that memorable, if I'm being blunt, and I was hoping for more. And finally, number 10, Yonaguni by Bad Bunny. And ending things off here, am I the only one who might have been expecting more? Seems like the theme of the week. Part of this is the reggaeton percussion, which feels like it might have a bit more texture, but feels increasingly stock and stale, even as the bass roils around the washed out mix and the chipmunk fragments. But the other part comes in just how much Bad Bunny's gonna caterwaul with limited subtlety about how if this girl currently dating someone else gives him the slightest indication that she's interested, he's gonna rush over, overwhelm her with affection. And look, I get how there's an audience for this sort of thing, especially as you can tell a lot of this is rooted in distant melodrama that he really can't act upon. But for what I've translated, it's also clunkier than it should be in selling it, especially by that outro where he just seems to want sex. I don't know, I'm not exactly disappointed with this, given that I've never fully been on the Bad Bunny train, but I feel like there should be a little more here. That's all I'm saying. But that was our week. Felt kind of heavier than it should be, but I can't say it wasn't interesting. Worst of the week, obviously Snowflakes from Tom MacDonald. He's pretty much got a lock on that spot. But I hate to say the dishonorable mention is going to go to Roddy Ricch for Late at Night. Man, I really wish that was a lot better than it is. Best of the week though, yep, you know what, both slots are going to Lil Baby and Lil Durk, with Rich Off Pain with Rod Wave getting the best of the week, and LYNGBY getting the honorable mention. Yeah, I'm a little surprised even with myself on that song, but it really goes off. But I can't expect any of this to stick around next week, given that Migos and Polo G will likely be fighting for supremacy here. Stay tuned to catch all that. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse.